There's a lot of episodes out there and coding tutorials out there that discuss things like the coding syntax, coding languages, how to get certain projects working, and other sort of practical skills, sort of hands-on skills. But today, I kind of wanted to step away from that and talk about developer education, specifically talking about what it takes to not only be educated as someone who is an aspiring developer, but also what it takes to be a developer educator, a coding educator, or even just straight up a teacher, if you will. So in this interview episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Shant Dashjian from Scrimba to discuss the developer education landscape and to gain insights into his job as an educator. Shant works as a teacher at Scrimba and also has his own venture called Pro Coding Mentor, where he acts as a mentor and code reviewer. Shant has a master's degree in computer science and has worked all over the industry for over the past decade, giving him insights into not only traditional education, but also the online learning space. If you've ever been curious what goes into becoming a developer educator or are interested in learning code yourself, our conversation is something that you're not going to want to miss. And before we cut to that interview episode, I just want to say, if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And if you want to help not only yourself out, but us as well, you can net yourself up to 20% off a Scrimba Pro plan. You can find the link to get that discount in the show description and in the show notes, with full details in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. And last but not least, remember that we are powered by Code Rabbit. They give you the power of AI code reviews to help cut your code review time in half. Check out the link in the show notes and the episode description to net yourself a 14-day free trial, no credit card needed, and just a 2-click sign up with a GitHub or GitLab account. And now, without further ado, let's cut to that interview right now. All right, everybody, we have Shant on the line here. And before we jump into this loaded episode, Shant, what's up? What's going on? And what are you working on?
Life is good, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. A lot is going on in the worlds of Scrimba. We are finalizing working on the data structures and algorithms course, planning on releasing it next week. So I'm very excited about that.
That's excellent. And I know that, Scrimba, like we had a conversation with Per, and we had a conversation with a few others, I believe, over text on social media about how Scrimba has recently, earlier this year, just broke into the back end market. How's that going? Like, because you guys were, primarily, if not entirely, front end before.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So, as you said, Scrimba has been focused mostly on the front end. From the very beginning, we added the AI engineering path along with the AI revolution that we're still witnessing here. This year, we've been very excited that we've been able to add backend support. So that meant we were able to run containers, web containers, which means we could do things like Node and Express and many things like that. That enabled us to have a full stack career path release this year. And we're also looking forward to releasing the backend career path soon as well.
Excellent. Because I know that, Mike and I have discussed, that's my co-host on our Tuesday episodes. And like Mike and I have discussed so many times that like nowadays, like I'd say maybe 5 years ago ish, people were a little more separated. You could be, I'm mostly front end or I'm mostly back end. Now it seems like, especially with like Next.js and things like that, it's like, hey, let's just like, you're going to develop this. And it doesn't matter whether you touch the back end, the front end or both, you got to develop this. And so you kind of quote unquote have to be kind of a full stack person now.
Yeah, and I think that's true to a great extent. One big reason is because we have so many technologies now and many options to pick from, but also because things have been relatively easier to build. I mean, not only because of AI, but because of frameworks that enable us to do this full stack development now. So that makes sense for us developers to, even if we specialize in an area, just to be versed enough to be able to be useful in other areas as well along the stack.
I mean, we're going a little off script here, but I do have a question actually based on what you just said, because, Mike and I always, we struggle with trying to help people get started. Like one of the things is like someone comes in to this field and they're like complete beginner, probably haven't, actually in many cases have never programmed before. And it's a lot to say like, well, hey, like, get started with what we call the three pillars, HTML, CSS, JS. It's like, okay, that's already three things. And then,
Yep.
by the way, you have this like, then maybe learn React or a Svelte or something. It's like, oh, okay, but wait, there's more. There's, learn your
Mhm.
Next.js or learn your Svelte kit as well. And it's like, wait, what's
Mhm.
going on? And then it's like, oh, by the way, there's all this like server stuff that you have to, learn and things like that. And you were
Mhm.
mentioning that it's, it's easier now. Would you say that it's easier for someone that has like been in the field, or would you say it's actually easier to get started as well, or is there like a bit of a contrast there?
It's easier to get started because of the availability of the resources we have. So, one of the things that have evolved over time is the availability of online learning. So, up until maybe over a decade ago, traditional education was the primary way to get into the field, right? You had to go through a 4-year bachelor's degree, get a computer science or software engineering degree, and then get into the field. That's no longer the case. We have way more accessible resources now, way more affordable, and accelerated path to get into the field. So I think that's one big reason. But back to your point, I think the fundamentals are still the great place to start. So early 90s, you had HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in 1995. Those are still the pillars of web development. So those are still the first thing you need to learn as a web developer. Yeah, and that's 30 years ago, and it's still true today.
Well, I'm glad you validated us, because like we've been talking about how like the three pillars were so strong in our show. We've been doing this for a number of years now. We're so
Yep.
strong in like all our recommendations, and then there's just like lately we feel like there's a crack in them, like a little bit, where it's like we're starting to get quite a bit of stuff. But you're 100% correct with the
Yeah.
resources being like so
Yeah.
available.
Yeah, absolutely. Even now with AI enabling many people to get into the field and learn relatively faster, they still need to learn the basics. So we definitely, whether in Scrimba or outside, or even when I mentor students and learners in my side business, I definitely recommend that students don't use AI to learn early on,
Okay.
because you need to go through the steps of learning, and you don't want to accelerate that part.
Right. Because the thing is I guess that's the difference between using AI as like a helper, I suppose, versus using it as like
Yeah,
a crutch, right?
absolutely, absolutely. You want to assist you in the process of learning, not do the learning for you.
Right, 100%. And
Yep.
actually, like, so it's speaking of learning, actually, like to change gears just
Mhm.
slightly here, because I noticed on your
Yep.
LinkedIn, Shant, that I noticed
Mhm.
that you have a master's degree in computer science, so you've kind of gone
Yep.
through the kind of traditional school path. And I'm just wondering, like,
Mhm.
can you tell us about your path into tech, and also how you ended up working at Scrimba, rather than being, let's say, like an educator, like a professor or something at a traditional school, like a college or a university?
Yeah. My journey into programming started in high school. I took a programming class, learning basic programming language, and I loved it since then. So I knew that this is what I want to do. Along with that, I always enjoyed teaching. So programming and teaching have been a parallel path for me for many decades now, and I've enjoyed it. So after that, I went through a bachelor's degree in software engineering, then a master's degree in computer science. Joined the field. I've been in the industry for over 15 years now. I've worn different hats, from a tester to a scrum master to an agile coach to a developer to now a teacher at Scrimba. So it's been a fantastic journey. That's in a nutshell.
Well, what would you say then? Like, you've experienced a
Mhm.
traditional education, but then obviously you work in
Yep.
sort of like I would say like a newfound kind of education, online education. So like, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that? Like the difference between an online education versus a traditional education. And obviously, like, I guess there's some nuance there, because many
Mhm.
universities and colleges will offer online courses either partially or entirely.
Yeah. Yes, things have changed a bit, and we have different options. So the way I think of online learning, or online education, if you will, is that it's a different way to have access to education. Traditional education, in my opinion, still has great value. It's a great investment. The reality is today we have a faster, more accessible, more affordable, most of the time near free or free, cost-wise, ways to learn web development and programming, accessible, everywhere you are. So that gives people options. At the end of the day, whether you go through the traditional path of learning programming, or you go through an online platform, be it a course, a YouTube video, or one of the many other ways to learn online, at the end of the day, you still need to do the work, which means you still need to build things. And in my opinion, I think it's very valuable to also teach and share what you learn, because I think that's one of the most effective ways to learn. So when people talk in the online education realm, people have been worried about and complaining about tutorial help for many, many years now. And the solution that's recommended, which I also recommend as well, is to build things. You can't be just a consumer of content. You need to use it to build things in order to process it and actually have a level of capability that you can use to be valuable to people who will pay you to build things, your future employer, that is. And that was still the case in traditional education as well. You still need to go through building projects and different points of your education as well. So I think it's a different nature, but ultimately you still need to do the work.
It's really interesting that you mentioned tutorial hell, because like we talked about that like a lot when we first started this show, and in fact we had many people reach out to us on Discord where I was talking to a couple guys for 2-3 years, and
Yep.
like I just work in my own web dev agency. I just make websites for clients and things. Whereas they were being educated the entire time. Like they would ask me questions about like the show and things, and I'd be like, oh, like, what are you building, or where are you working? And a lot of them, or I shouldn't say a lot, I should say a few of them were like, oh, I'm just, I'm doing this YouTube course, or I'm like stuck doing all this YouTube stuff, or I'm stuck doing like reading up on this like technology or what have you, or I'm going to learn React. No, I'm going to learn Svelte. No, I'm going to learn Vue. And they never get out of that. Whereas like, I feel like a traditional education and largely like a Scrimba pathway, like the different pathways you guys have, like kind of push you along where it's like, yo, like we need to learn, lesson 2 now, like let's keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought in Scrimba to this conversation, because I think one big value that Scrimba provides, and it differentiates it from other ways of online learning, is, of course, the combination of the video and the editor in one place. So the learner will not need to change context. Like even if you're watching a traditional, let's say, video on YouTube, you need to pause it and go to something on the editor or your ID and then come back. In Scrimba, you have it in one place. You pause the video and do things in the editor, and then you can come back to the video, which is phenomenal. But the way we utilize this combination, which is very powerful, is that we have challenges and practices in almost every lesson in every course we have, which means you as a learner will be encouraged and almost have to do things along the way. You can't just sit there as a passive consumer of content. We don't want that. And the platform is designed to enable you to do things along the way. So by the time you finish a few lessons or even a course, or definitely the entire path, you have built many projects and you have gone through challenges along the way, in addition to the main projects, with every new piece of knowledge and every technology that you're learning, so that it becomes a part of the way you think about programming. You don't need to pause and do things. Of course, we also encourage you to build afterwards, but you've already done a lot of building along the way, which is very important.
And like, I mean, it's a great technological innovation, really. Like we call it the interactive media player code editor in our Scrimba talks. And like, it's a great, thing to have right there, because in particular, like the world, like if you pause and you're like, I'm going to go and, like, I don't really understand this CSS thing from YouTube, so I'm going to go look it up. But like Twitter's right there, or like, Instagram's right there, or your phone's right there. And you're kind of like, you've kind of lost that immersion, and many people will then start that doom scroll or what have you. And you get those distractions in there. Whereas this is sort of like, yo, like stay here. We got you. You can play with the code right in the editor and then actually just go through it. And like, it's like a modern day way to like guide somebody without I guess those distractions kind of potentially coming in. Like once you open that new tab, like it's over for many people.
Absolutely, yeah, and we want you to stay in the zone. And again, I this year when we added the backhand support, it became even more powerful because now you have a terminal and you can run things as well on the backhand. So it's really powerful.
That's great. That's great. And I actually want to just switch gears it's a tiny bit again because we're talking about a lot of the great things that Scrimba can do and a lot of the different ways that you can like learn coding and things. And that is kind of very reminiscent of like the tech industry. So like having tech credentials and having tech know-how does open a lot of doors for a person because, tech is a very, very vast field. And so I want to kind of touch base on there and ask you, personally, like what drew you to developer education specifically? I know you said you had a passion for education, for teaching specifically, but like why would you go for that education instead of like traditional software roles? And like how long have you been in developer education? Was there ever like a time where you were like, maybe I should just go and be a developer, let's say at like Microsoft or wherever, right?
Yeah, I've done both. I've spent years teaching, and I've spent years also in the industry as a developer. So I like doing both, and I do switch between one another, and sometimes they're in parallel. Like right now, I am a teacher in Scrimba, and I also mentor students on the side at procodingmentor.com. But I'm also consulting for a company right now on an AI project. So but I enjoy doing both. Sometimes you need to separate, of course. If you're working full time for, let's say, a big tech or mid-sized company or even a startup, that's your dedicated time doing that. And as a teacher, let's say in a traditional institute, you may need to do that full time as well. I think I'm happy that I could do those things sometimes in parallel.
Would you ever consider teaching anything other than tech? Because you do sound quite passionate about the education angle, of course, the coding angle as well. But like, would you ever like, are you passionate enough about teaching where you're like, you know what, I'll teach something else, whatever, botany or something else that you're skilled in?
Botany is probably a bit far-fetched, but I did teach English for many, many years, and especially for tech, conversational English as well. It's kind of related, but sometimes I view things are as very related because for me, teaching a language and teaching programming are pretty much in the same field. You're teaching a way to communicate with something else or someone else, if you look at it in that abstract way. So yeah, teaching languages is something I also enjoy, and I've done for many years as well.
Do you think, because like you're kind of like balancing like the kind of the two passions here, like do you ever feel like a lot of developers will have that sort of I guess that kind of like scatterbrain when it comes to like side hustles and side businesses and things like that? Like do you ever have that desire to say, you know what, I'm going to start up my own dev agency, maybe hire some devs to like do that primarily while I remain as an educator, whether it's English or Scrimba or wherever? Do you ever get that sort of like like you want to do this, you want to do that, you want to do this, like that's where you kind of feel like you're being pulled in many directions by like your passions or your work goals?
That's definitely possible. And here actually, who's the CEO of Scrimba, had a similar challenge as well, because we like to do different things. And it is a challenge, and it's important to focus on the things that you want to get done. Like, for example, if I'm working on a course with Scrimba, that becomes my primary focus. And if there's any project or some consulting happening, I'll push that until I'm done with the course and I can move on. So yes, if need be, one needs to be focused on one thing, as opposed to juggling different balls there. Yeah, that is true.
What do you think about that for education? So like, we've already mentioned, we've already kind of talked about Scrimba, and like Scrimba stands out, of course, from other platforms, like maybe like a YouTube, because you don't have to do that change of the tab. And how much do you think that interactive media player code editor actually like benefits the student in terms of keeping them in the zone? Like how much value do you think that is? Because I feel like a lot of people don't really kind of zoom in on that. And like you said, it's like, hey, you have to focus on one thing. And even myself, it's like, I got to do a LinkedIn post. Oh, shoot, I'm supposed to edit that episode. Well, hang on, there's like a client calling, and you're kind of all over the place. And so like, I kind of want to zoom in on that, because it's like, hey, if you're on that interactive media player code editor, you're just sitting there like learning. I feel like it's kind of like really drawing you into that zone. Like, do you see that, or like, do you maybe hear from students about that where they're like, hey, this really kept me there, and I actually, finished my 2 lessons a night or whatever their goal is?
Yeah, and we mentored students about that a lot because I think the nature of media and the web and social media for many years now has been to get things quickly. And unfortunately, that gives the sense for people consuming it that they actually got whatever they wanted to get out of that in that amount of time, which, of course, we know when it comes to learning is not true. So we always encourage students, number one, to focus on one thing. So if you're learning HTML now, that's what you're learning. The reason why I can sometimes switch from one context to another is because I've done this for many years. A lot of the things I do are not new things. Of course, I too need to learn, and when needed, I need to focus on one thing. But when that is not the case, it's easier for me to switch context because I've done this for a very long time. If you're still learning, if this is still your first programming language or first stack, it's very impractical to do that. The most effective and most successful way to learn programming and web development is to focus on one thing at a time. And when you feel that you're well versed enough to move on to the other technology, you do that. And again, back to Scrimba, we have a well organized front end career path. We have the AI engineer career path, the full stack. All of those are organized in such a way that you focus initially on one thing at a time, but then gradually we start using 2 or 3 technologies at a time as we see fit at the point of your learning journey at that moment. But along with that, I want to emphasize one other thing, which is it's not about finishing, because you will never stop learning and you will never finish learning. And especially in our field, you will always need to be learning new things. So the student need to understand that they are investing in this for the long run, and it's not about finishing something in a month or 2. It will take you as a student as long as it needs to take you, and that also depends on your circumstances. Are you learning full time? Are you learning back time? Are you learning even in the evening after you're done with work and you're tired? Are you doing it in the morning because you have the time? All those things matter on the way you will learn and how much time you will spend. But most importantly, you need to make progress consistently and have a discipline to continue to move forward and not worry about finishing quickly, but focus on learning and definitely remove all the distractions, which again, Scrimba, the environment enables you to do that because you have everything in one place. So focus on that. Focus on the concept you're learning right now. And that is for you is the win, is that you're now focused and you're learning this concept. And when you have that challenge that we have built in that Scrim, and you get it done, that's the success. That's the win for you. And that's what you should be celebrating every day as you learn.
I really like that you brought up the time commitment. And the reason why I like that is because so many people, and myself included, you're right. Like everything's kind of instant. It's like, hey, I'm going to quickly go write that LinkedIn post. And it is quick, a couple minutes at most, maybe 5 minutes if it's long. You post it and then you just kind of like check, hey, is my impressions going up? Do I have any comments to answer? And it's even those interactions and checking those interactions is very, very quick. And I feel as though a lot of people, they fail to remember, again, myself included, that there is a process and there is a process to learning. Like just to share like a very brief personal story, it's like I've been learning to golf for 3-4 years. I have friends who are like 2 years behind me, and they'll be like, how do you do that? And I'm like, well, 4 years of like practice. Like I've been practicing in the backyard with a practice net, going to the range, playing rounds. Like I'm trying to get better. And there's been many times in my learning where it's like, man, that was a bad day at the range, but you need to have those days because that's part of the process. The next time I'm there, I'm like, wow, why am I doing so much better? It's like we fail, I think, in this day and age to understand that like, just because I went to the range, I didn't suddenly hit the ball 100 yards further. And I think it's the same thing with coding is just because you went and you're like, I just don't get, one thing I see a lot of people actually get stuck in when they're a complete beginner is like functions, like a JavaScript function. They're like, what do you mean? Because they just want to write out that code over and over again rather than have like that reusable little bit. And I'm like, no, like, like let's switch it, like, use functions. Like this happened in our college a lot because we had a one web dev course, and I feel as though like people don't, like they just think like, well, I don't get it, and they just kind of like throw it down. They're like, whatever, I'm out, right? They throw down the golf club, they throw down that keyboard, figuratively, hopefully, and and they like they're done with it. Where it's like, no, like you don't understand this, but if you keep trying and practicing, like there is a process that your brain is growing and learning.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good story and a great example. And I think along with that, for anyone who will learn how to play any musical instrument, they know what it takes for you, right? I didn't get that experience, but I come from a generation where we do things with patience, we have discipline, we practice and keep on practicing things. Like for when I learned to program, I didn't just learn it. I knew that I can do this. I got the logic, and I realized that I have the passion. But it took me years to feel that I'm confident and I can build things. So patience is important, and unfortunately, the nature of technology that we are immersed in everywhere we go goes against that and gives us as humans the very false impression that speed is good and you need to get things fast, when in reality our brains are the same brains of us Homo sapiens that we've been using for hundreds of thousands of years. We still learn the same exact way, and we need to understand that. And again, I think the learning a musical instrument is a good example. So you listening out there, if you haven't learned to play any musical instrument, ask someone who had that experience, and you'll know what it takes for you to become a programmer.
It's a very, very good point. Like I used to play piano for a number of years, probably about a decade, and I haven't in probably a decade now, but I used to for about a decade, and that's exactly right. Where you kind of start and you're like, well, I understand how to read the the notes. Let me just go to like level 12, and it's like, well, hang on, like it's gonna take. You got to go like level 1 through 12 or whatever. We can't be just jumping into this. Like we got to like learn how to. It's even physically, like you're kind of like limbering up your fingers. You're getting used to like quick reactions, and even like flipping the page on the like the music book or whatever. Like because like you're like, okay, I got to quickly do this. Oh, there's a bit of footwork if you're using the pedals, and I started learning organ as well. And so like even that, like I learned like the piano and then organ, and like that's a step. And like that almost feels like it could be like a contrast or a compare and contrast to someone who maybe went from the 3 pillars and then decided to learn React. It's like you're bringing your experience, but you still have to like do that slow process. But like you're still learning, like you've learned 3 things now. Now you're on to that 4th.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you remember how many hours per day or every other day or however you were practicing as you were learning the piano?
Yes, 1 hour a day. I was lucky enough to have my I had a neighbor actually that was kind of like my adopted grandmother, and she actually taught me to her max kind of thing. And then I ended up going for lessons once a week. So like on those days it'd be 2 hours, and then I would go to her house every morning and play for an hour every single morning.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It was a thank you, but it was a process.
That's what it takes. That's what it takes.
Would you say like so there's a lot of pathways, like we talked about traditional education, we've talked about, or I guess we haven't talked about, but people take boot camps. Of course, we've talked about YouTube tutorials, and people obviously do that for everything from like plumbing through fixing cars through coding through whatever. What makes Scrimba kind of stand out, do you think, from those? Like we've mentioned that interactive media player code editor, of course. But is there anything else maybe that like, makes it really like, hey, you should maybe jump into Scrimba instead of, one of these other methods?
Well, there are many things. One thing we talked about already, which is the offering. Like the Scrimba offers, initially we had a front-end career path, which was very, very comprehensive and very effective, actually. And then as the AI revolution was unraveling, we were really going along with it, and we had a complete AI engineer path that's very, very effective as well. Continuing with the offering that we have now, we have full stack, and now we're adding back end as well. So the offering itself is very rich, but in addition, I think we have a good community and we listen to the community. Meaning, every course we added because we had students or future students wanting that course. You see that in the various frameworks we have introduced. I mean, we for a very long time we had React as the main framework for many reasons, and because it's in high demand. And Bob Zerol, our fantastic instructor, maintained that course, meaning as soon as React had the new version released, we had the course there as well. So our courses are up to date, which is very important in our technology and the fast pace of new frameworks and new versions of frameworks that getting released. Let's see. So in addition to the offering and our courses being the response to what the community is asking for and what the market is demanding and expecting developers to know, I think back to the main point, which is the interactivity that's built into the platform. Make it fun to use. Like I really like pausing and trying things out, because that gives me the instant feedback that I got it. And I use Scrumba as well as a learner in the things that I'm not well versed yet. And I really like that because it gives me the validation right there that I got the idea so I can move forward. And the cool thing about Scrumba is, and we instructors remind students as well in the courses, is that if you don't need to move beyond, like, go to the next lesson if you didn't get this. You can pause, you can go back and watch this one more time or as many times as you feel like until you feel that you got it. And the built-in challenges we have make sure that you don't move beyond a point until you got what you need to know at that point. And again, back to Bob Zerol's courses, I really like when every time he emphasizes, hey, this challenge requires you to have known this. So if you didn't, go back and watch that lesson and then come back here. Meaning, don't rush, take your time. The challenges will be here to make sure that you understood the concept and you learned it. So yeah, it's the interactivity of it and the instant feedback. I think it's a great value for learning in the Scrumba platform.
And honestly, like that, those roadblocks, like those challenges, and I mean, maybe they're not roadblocks for some that understand, but those are great and different, quite different from traditional schools. Because traditional schools, they're obviously like teaching en masse. It's like catered, a little bit like catering food. You're kind of doing this en masse thing. And so you have to go on to that next course, whether, Bill down the table is, done his like appetizer or not. You have to keep moving, keep moving. And like, I feel like that's where a lot of people feel left behind in traditional school. And so like Scrimba and then other like online courses, of course, will like they'll have those roadblocks. And then like it's like, hey, I can stop. I can even go back and I could be like, Bob Zerol says I need to know this. And like, I mean, I watched that, but I don't remember it or I don't really get it. Truthfully, it's like, okay, there's a roadblock here. I got to go back and rewatch that or take some notes or what have you on it.
Yeah, and now that we have added the AI feedback in our challenges, that's even more powerful because now we get feedback from the AI that your solution was correct, and if not, you'll know right there and then. Again, added value to the already interactive way of learning that Scrumba provides.
100%. And I have some questions actually now for from the kind of the educator angle a little bit and. Because there's a lot of relevant coding languages out there. Like, obviously, this is a primarily web development podcast, but there's people, I mean, I've even had a guest recently that was primarily a Python guy. I have people that have been on here where they've, they used to do PHP en masse when WordPress was new. And now now they're Python or now they're assembly. I had one person, I don't know if he actually made it on the show, but I've chatted with him and he's like an assembly thing now for embedded systems and things. So there's lots and lots of relevant code languages is what I'm getting at. And so I know you mentioned there's like, demands of the market and, demands of the students. However, Scrimba does have a lot of instructors. So how do you personally choose what you're going to teach next?
Yeah, very good question. So primarily, as I mentioned earlier, Scrimba responds to what we feel the community and the market is asking for. When we decide that, like when we discuss what we want in the career path here or there, or what new courses to build next. We are a team of instructors. Many of us have specialties. Like when it comes to the frameworks, we have Bob Zerol, we have Tom Shant, and many other excellent instructors. I'm lucky that I've spent over a decade in the industry, and I did teach prior to that as well. As in, I taught CS, different topics as well. So I'm lucky. Of course, I still have a lot of things I'd like to learn and become more well versed in, but because I have that experience, it enables me to be able to teach different things. So far, I was able to teach web development, AI, web tooling, web testing, and now we're building this data structures and algorithms course. It definitely needs to be something that I've worked on and or taught. Or I can become well versed over the next few months when it is necessary to build a course about it. But primarily, it's been things that have been either used on the job or taught at some point.
That contrasts perfectly actually in my next question, because I know a lot of people, and we even briefly touched on it, where there's like a lot of people that will be learning like web development, and then they'll maybe share some tips and tricks that they pick up along the way on their, on their LinkedIn or their X profiles or what have you. And like there's some people that maybe they want to be an educator and they worry about, hey, like I'm not a master of, this chosen language. And so that's my question is like, do you have to master your chosen language? Let's say you choose like CSS. Do you have to be like a CSS master before teaching it? And how long do you actually spend learning something before you teach it? I think you mentioned a few weeks there.
But you definitely need to be well versed in whichever you're going to teach. I think that's the bottom line. Something completely new, I would rather have someone who had the experience using it and or teaching it to do that. I think that's a better fit. And that goes along with the fact that I'm doing other things as well in the coming months or so. So trying to learn something in a very short amount of time that's totally new to you, and in order to teach it, I don't think that's the best path. I think it's more useful for the students to be learning from someone who used that technology, because that's part of what we do in Scrumba and the courses we teach is we're sharing our experience in the industry. We're not just people who read a book and then now teaching it. We're people who've used those technologies on the job. We built things with those technologies that people now use, and we draw from that experience. And when an instructor, and I think this is a good thing, feels that they've spent more time teaching things as opposed to building things or being in the industry, I think it's a good idea for someone to take a break from teaching and go back to the industry and spend some time, whether it's a year or as many years as they feel like, to get back that real world experience and the building for the real world experience, because I think that's the best way to know what you're talking about in layman's term.
And I do agree with that, because like me personally, I did go through a college program, which was 3 years of like in class, but then I had a year and a half actually, approximately, of on the job. And like a lot of my server knowledge, I'd honestly say about 99% of it comes just from that. For me being on, being in the field and, having been a sysadmin and having been in networking for a time as well, because I jumped around different roles and like, that's 100% right. Is like, if I was like, hey, I'm just going to teach, server admin or server stuff, like there's a lot of stuff servers can do. I'm going to teach just from my college course in it. It would be a much shallower course than if I I go into the real world, I actually do that job. Now it's like, I have some stories to share. And even if I'm not sharing the stories, like there's knowledge in those stories that I can then pass on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I really like that you've worn different hats and worked with different pieces of technologies along the way. I think that's very valuable.
It was much to the chagrin of one of my bosses. He really wanted me to stick around, but I was like, no, I'm going to I'm gonna learn something else, and it was a little bit of hell, but I'm glad I did it in the end, because I learned that I learned some interesting stuff, and I also learned a couple of jobs that I do not want. So
that's also good, knowing what you don't want to do, right?
Yeah. So just kind of like final educator question here. So there's we talked about the 3 pillars, and I'll call those the fundamentals, if you will, and like, how do you balance teaching the fundamentals, so like something like a vanilla JavaScript, versus teaching
Mhm.
frameworks, because they might change every few years? And do you have to update courses frequently? How does all that work?
Yeah, the answer is yes. We need to update courses frequently. So back to Bob's role, he is our React instructor. That's his specialty. He also released the Next.js course as well, which is, of course, a React framework. Bob's role needed to stay up to date. He maintains the courses and his React courses and the course which is on a video on the free coding uh, 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 the YouTube channel, Free Code Camp.
Yep.
It has been viewed by millions of students. So that's I think that's his specialty. So yes, for the frameworks, for teaching the frameworks, one needs to be staying up to date with the new versions.
Do you guys touch ever? I mean, it's less, like I would estimate, but like we have ES5, ES6, and like there's changes to CSS, and browsers start to like adopt things, like they allow, for example, like first thing stands out in my mind is CSS nesting without using like a preprocessor or what have you. Do you guys have to manipulate those courses as well? Like, do you bother with those? Because those are kind of like, I don't know if I'd call them fringe features, but that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. They're, nesting isn't exactly the most important thing. However, it is helpful in CSS.
Yeah, I think we focus on the core curriculum, and whenever there is a need for change, we definitely go back and make those changes too. One thing I liked what we did with Scrimba is we partnered with MDN, so they had their front end curriculum that's available, and Scrimba partnered with MDN so that whatever they teach in their curriculum is taught in the Scrimba front end career path. So that they actually recommend for students to go use Scrimba for learning those same concepts. And whenever we feel the need there is to make a revision, we go back and do that. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and like that's obviously key, because I know that I've definitely like gone back to like a random blog or a random YouTube video I've watched and been like, okay, yeah, this is cool, and then I go to do it, and it's like, hang on, I'm 2 versions of Svelte back. And it's like, what's happening here? Like, why is none of this working? It's like, I'm such a newbie, like I didn't know. So
yeah.
Well, Shant, this has been a fantastic interview, absolutely packed. I'd like to, before we conclude here today, I'd like to invite you to take the floor, share any, links, charities, social media profiles, whatever it is. And the links to those things will be displayed, of course, on the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. So you have the floor. Please take it.
Thank you. Well, to know the latest and greatest of what I'm working on, you can check out my website, shant-dashjian.com. I have my mentoring site where you can book mentoring sessions with me. That's procodingmentor.com. But again, back to Scrimba, check out the latest and greatest with Scrimba. We have a newsletter now on LinkedIn called Hello World. This is the second issue this week, where we share the latest and greatest in Scrimba courses and what's going on in the community and web development in general. So check that out as well.
Excellent, Shant. And thank you once again. Again, all those links for the listener out there, all those links will be in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com if you want to, sign up for that newsletter, check out the mentoring site, or check out Shant's website himself as well. And once again, Shant, thank you very much for being on the show. It has been a pleasure.
Matt, it's been a pleasure as well.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that interview as much as we did, but it is now time to end. And before we do so, remember that you can support episodes like this on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML all the things. So check out the tiers and give that a go. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons: Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se, Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server, and Stacy Mosteler from the website swoonworthydesigns.com. And remember that we are powered by Code Rabbit. They give you the power of AI code reviews to help cut your code review time in half. Check out the link in the show notes and the episode description to net yourself a 14-day free trial. No credit card needed, and just a 2-click sign up with a GitHub or GitLab account. And last but not least, we'd like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on HTMLAllTheThings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.